Now we are going to examine the networking support in Android in more detail, step by step through a set of exercises. As we realized, if you're exchanging data with a server, typically for your mobile app, the data is encoded in JSON format. Now, when you receive data from a server, you will receive the data in JSON format, and then you have to convert the data into a format that is easier for you to use within your Android application. So as a first step, we will look at how you would take a JSON string and then convert it into Java objects so that you can access the same information using the Java objects directly and then use it within your Android app. So to do that, we'll go back to our chat client application that we had worked on earlier. If you remember, we had this user interface where we were displaying the list of contacts or our friends within this chat client application. Now, when we constructed this list of friends, we had a fixed list of friends that we put into this string array, and then we were loading that from the string array. Now, suppose you had a chat client application that was interacting with the server, and then you were downloading the list of friends from your server and then initializing your contacts on your application. How do you go about doing that? So that's the challenge in this exercise. So here you see me showing a list of friends. In addition, I added in a couple of new features to those list of friends. This also sort of brings you closer to the way your contacts are displayed in your typical chat client applications that you have seen. So you have a picture of your friend being displayed, and then you have your friend's name. Perhaps you may also have a status message or the last message that that friend sent to you displayed within this list here. So I am going to use that concept as a way of illustrating how you would process a JSON string. Here, I am constructing each item in this list with 3 units of information. First, the friend's name. Second, the status message that the friend puts up on his or her own chat client. And third, the picture of the client. So how do we go about constructing a list view using these 3 items? Furthermore, how do I process information from a JSON string and then render this list view from that JSON string? So that's the first part of the exercise that we're going to examine. Later on, we will see how we would actually process the JSON string in the background and subsequently communicate with the server and then download this friends information from the server, including pictures of those friends, and then create your list view. As is our normal practice, go to the course site, download the zip file, unzip, and import the project into Android Studio. And once you do that, you will see that I have taken the chat client application and then stripped off all the unnecessary parts from it, because I don't want that to interfere with your understanding of this implementation. And I am retaining only the contacts activity and the myArray adapter, which I use as a custom adapter in order to create the contacts activity. Earlier, for the contacts activity, we didn't have a custom adapter because the contacts activity was simply displaying the list of friends constructed from the string array that was available to us. Now, when you download and import the project, go ahead and then open contacts.java file, and then also let's examine the layouts that we are using, and also look at the myArrayAdapter.java file. First, let's look at how we create a single item in the list. Earlier, we had the friend item that we had used when we were constructing the contacts list, and the friend item contained a single text view. Now I have modified that friend item layout file to include 3 pieces of information here. So as you can see from this picture, this is using a relative layout to lay out 3 pieces of information inside this relative layout. So I am constructing the list item from 3 pieces of information. First is a image view. We have already seen how we use image views before. This is where I am going to substitute the friend's picture. Now I have a placeholder at this moment, which is the Android guy's image that is already included in the application. The second part, the name of our friends. This is a standard text view that we're going to use here. And in addition, I have a third text view with smaller lettering right below the friend name, which I label as status message. So these 3 items I'm going to use for creating an item in my list view. You can switch to the text version of this layout and see exactly how I created this list view. So you can see the image view here and the 2 text views. In particular, notice how I position these 3 items inside my relative layout. So I am positioning the first text view to the right of the image view which I call as an avatar, and then the second text view, which is displaying the status message, is right below the first text view and then left aligned to the first text view. So that is how inside a relative layout I can use alignments between the different elements or different widgets that I'm including in order to create a nice rendering of the layout. So after examining the code there, the next point for us to remember is that we need to create this list item. Now, how do you create a list item? Now, if it was a simple text view, then the array adapters that we had used earlier would work fine. But in this case, this is more complicated than that. So that's the reason why I resort to using a custom array adapter. So here I am extending the array adapter and implementing my own custom array adapter. We have seen this kind of approach already when we did the chat client application before. So this is not something unusual for you. You have seen this approach earlier. So inside here, I am using the getView method, and in the getView method, I am initializing all the different text views. I am right now not initializing the image view here. I will later on come to visit to show you how I will initialize the image view with the picture of a friend. Okay, so these 3 parts should be clear to you. So pay a little attention to the code here to understand how the array adapter has been created. The contacts list activity layout is exactly the same as we used before. It's a list view that I am enclosing inside there, so it's not going to be any different. Let's now go to contacts activity implementation and examine what I am doing in here. So in the contacts activity, I am, as expected, extending the app compat activity, and in here I am keeping track of my friend's information using a class here. This class contains 3 items in there: ID, name, and status message, which I'm going to initialize when I read in from the JSON string. So we'll see how that is done in later on. So this is a class that I'm creating here, an inner class inside my contacts class. This class, I'm going to use it to create a list of friend info objects, and that is exactly what I'm storing inside this list here. In addition, you see that I have already declared a JSON string here. So this is a string in JSON format. I have subdivided into pieces so that it's more easier for you to see each part of the JSON string in more detail. And this is the string that I'm going to process in order to construct my list view. Now, to process this string, I am going to take the help of a method that I have implemented later called as the process friend info, which takes this JSON string as a parameter and then converts the JSON string into a list of friend info objects. Then I'm going to take those friend info objects to initialize my list view. So right here, I am initializing the list view. You have already learned how you will set up the list views earlier. Now, so the last part left for us is to go and examine how we actually process this friend info string, JSON string, and then convert it into a list array of JSON friend info objects. So let's drop down. The remaining parts are quite familiar to you. You have seen some of these earlier. Let's visit this process friend info method and see how we would go about implementing this in practice. So this is the part of the exercise that you are going to do. So as you see, I have two to-do comments there. We're going to substitute the code in place step by step and then understand what we are actually doing. Now, to process a JSON string, Android already has built-in JSON string parsers called as JSON parser. You can make use of that in order to parse the JSON string into its components and then use them. But here I'm going to take the help of a very well established library from Google called as the JSON library, JSON library. Now this allows you to take a JSON string and automatically construct objects, Java objects out of the JSON string. So it goes both ways. You can take a list of Java objects and then convert it into a JSON string, and you can take a JSON string and then load it into a list of objects. So how do we make use of this JSON library? So that's the next step that I'm going to illustrate to you now. Now, one reason why I would suggest for you to take the help of existing libraries is that these libraries are well tested, so you know that they work correctly, and they simplify your part of the code. They provide you with a lot of features that you can take advantage of. Instead of reinventing the wheel, you are just taking the help of this library to get your work done. So in many circumstances, I would suggest that you look around for pre-existing libraries for solving certain problems and then take the help of those libraries whenever needed to implement solutions within your code. So given this, let's now focus on implementing this process friend info method. First, I need to create a JSON object. Now, if you are going to employ JSON in your application, first you need to import the JSON library to be used within your Android application. Now, I have already configured this for you, but let me just quickly take you on a detour to this file called as build.gradle file. So you can open up this build.gradle file, and then you would notice inside this build.gradle file under dependencies, I am including the statement saying compile com Google code JSON and specifying the JSON library type there. By including this in my Gradle file, Android Studio automatically imports this library and includes it into my project. So that saves us a lot of trouble trying to configure our project. We just need to include these. So for all well-established libraries that you can use in your Android projects, typically they would supply you with a way of importing them using the Gradle files. So in case you're curious about how the JSON library gets into your app, this is how we do that. Now, getting back to contacts application, the code here, let's now step by step substitute the to-do statements with the appropriate code. Let me substitute the code in place, and then I'll explain to you what the code is doing. Getting back to the code, I have substituted the first to-do with the code for building a JSON object. So the way we build a JSON object is that we create a JSON builder like this, and then after that we will create a JSON object by saying JSON builder create. So this is the way that you take the help of the JSON library to build a JSON object, and we are then going to make use of this JSON object to do the conversion of the JSON string into JSON. Coming back to the code again, I have substituted the second to-do statement with a couple of statements here. Let's examine each one. The first statement is, of course, creating an array list and then initializing the friend info list variable that I have declared earlier with this new array list. I'm going to then take this array list and then from using the JSON object, I'm going to convert the JSON string to an array of these friend info objects. Now, if you read the JSON documentation, then you would see that if you use this from JSON method of this JSON library, you can say JSON from JSON, and the first parameter it takes is the JSON string. We have already acquired the JSON string coming in as the parameter to this method. We'll supply that as the first one. The second parameter is an array list of friend info objects. We have already seen how we declared the friend info class earlier. So I am going to supply that as the second parameter. So if I call this and then say arrays as list and then supply that, this is going to return an array list, which I am going to initialize my friend info list with. So at the end of the execution of the statement, I will be left with an array list of friend info objects. Each object would be initialized with the friend's name, the status message, and later on you will see that it will also be initialized with the URL of the picture of our friend that we can use for substituting in the image view. Okay, now this may look a bit disconcerting for you at this moment. If you read the JSON library's documentation, you will see that this is so simple that it saves you so much of trouble in writing your own JSON parsing code to actually traverse the JSON string and then cut it into pieces and then try to initialize each of those elements of your object and so on. So this is the reason why I recommend making use of pre-existing libraries wherever possible, because they would have already done much of the grunt work for you and it'll save you so much of trouble. Once you complete this part of the code, go ahead and run the application, and the net result would be what you saw at the beginning of this exercise. Once you run the application, you will see that now your list view displays the list of your friends together with their status messages and then a placeholder for their pictures. Now in this exercise, of course, the JSON string is very small. You have only 4 friends, so it is fairly straightforward to process that. But in case you have a long list of friends, which most of you probably do, then this is not the best approach to do so. processing strings, JSON strings, takes time. Not only that, if you are downloading the JSON string from a server, it is going to take even more longer time. Now, if you are doing such kind of work on your main UI thread, as I explained at the start of this week's modules, this is not a good idea. Whenever you need to do a lot of processing, you should always offload that work into background. In the next exercise, that is what we're going to examine. How do you offload the work to a background thread or a background task to do its work and then come back and initialize your user interface later.